Alright, today we are discussing nodes in DaVinci Resolve. Well, you can't even do any grading without having nodes. Nodes are adjustments that you use for your grading. This is like the base, the unit of color grading, right? So you refer to them as adjustments you make to the clip in DaVinci Resolve. Okay, so we'll use this image. This is from a film called Logline. I'll reset all grades and nodes. And as you can see, there is no grade on this right now. This is a node. So whatever I do to this node, if I add a bluish tint to the node on my offset on the color wheels, it's going to reflect there. If I reset it and add contrast, it's going to be affected. Okay? So obviously, you want to also do this the right way. And that's why the first thing I'll show you here, I'll tell you about nodes is this structuring. Do one adjustment per node. Okay? Do not cram all your adjustments into one node. I see people do this and you might run into problems. You might not, but most times, often than not, you always run into problems. Let's say you do your contrast here, you do your exposure here, you do your saturation here. Obviously, this looks terrible, but I'm just trying to make a point. And you come back and you say, okay, I don't know what's wrong with this clip, right? Sorry about that. And you say, I don't know what's wrong with this clip. Maybe it's the saturation. So you take back down the saturation and you observe that it's not the saturation. Okay, let me bring it back up again. Maybe it's the exposure. You bring it down and you take it back up. Nah, that's not the right way. One adjustment per node. So what do? You say this node, you right click and label it as what? Exposure. So important to label this thing. In Premiere Pro, it has been done. It has been done for you in the Lumetri page, where you have exposure, you have contrast, you have highlights, you have shadows, you have blacks and all that. All those things in a way are nodes arranged sequentially. But in DaVinci Resolve, it allows you to do it yourself manually. So you can decide to have your exposure first, you can decide to have your white balance first, you can decide to have your saturation first, however you want to do it. DaVinci Resolve just assumes that you are a pro at this. Okay? So which you are definitely going to be if you continue practicing and doing, these things I show you in the videos. So you have your exposure on one node, then you go to another node. I will tell you what I'm doing to get these nodes up here, okay, in a second, but I need you to understand that everything has to be done differently. Every adjustment that you make has to be done differently. And you can have a million of these nodes if you like. You see? You can have them a lot. So, and it doesn't really change anything. This is a 10-bit flow, a 32-bit flow system. So it won't really affect how things are. Of course, there are some effects that you add that will slow down your system. But if you're doing the basic stuff, if you like have a million of it, it doesn't really matter. It's the same thing as you're doing everything in one node, but you're just trying to be organized, isn't it? That's why you do them differently. And make sure you label them. So now let's go back to how do I get a node after this? You right click on this and you say add node and you say add serial. Before we even get to this, let's say you arrive and you find out that this is empty. What do? You right click and you say add node. You say corrector. We'll get to the types of nodes later, but start with this corrector. This is like the basic form of nodes, right? This is the basic node. That's the only node you actually have in DaVinci. If you say this is the kind of node, but every other thing is how you arrange it. Every kind of node that is in DaVinci is how you really kind of arrange it. You understand? So, which we will get into. So you have this, then you place your cursor on this green. This is the source, right? Or the input, the source input. So on this green circle here, you just drag and you see this line appears. Make sure your hand is on, you're left clicking and dragging. So you drag it to this green arrow up here. Then from this green box, you drag it to this output, and you have what we had before I deleted it, isn't it? That's one way. Or if you have something empty, like just hit Alt S and it does it for you, places the corrector node and also drags the line for you and connects everything. So Alt S is to add a serial node, right? So I can click on this, of course. Always click on, I might have like a lot of these nodes. It's the one you click on. Let's say I click on this, then I add a serial node, right? That one I clicked on before determines where the next serial node is applied or appears. So let's place this where it was. So if you have your, let me give you this quick tip before we continue. If you have your nodes scattered, let's say it's scattered like this, you were doing a lot, you were in the zone, and oh God, how do I arrange these things now? Look at number 1 is here, number 2 is here. I'm confused. Okay, rather than you doing it manually, just right click and say clean up node graph, and it arranges everything. Easy. So let's continue. So let me reset node graphs and graphs and grids and nodes. Reset all grades and nodes. If you have everything scattered and you say I want to go back to the beginning, just right click and say reset all grades and nodes, right? So we have this. You know how to get this. So how do I get a node after this? You say right click on this and you say add node, go to add serial, click on it, and you see you have it. And you can tell from the numbering, this is 1 and this is 2. Right. So if I want to get another node in front of 2, I can't click on 1. If I click on 1 and say add node, of course, add serial, this next one becomes number 2. But you see, this number 3 was number 2 before. But it is in front of this number 3, which was number 2 before, that I wanted to have the node. So I have to click on that node and say, right click and say add node, add serial. So it appears in front of it. Right. So that's how to get a node after another node. But how about getting a node before? So this is number 1, right? Let me name it. So that because when I get a node before this number changes. It becomes number 2. And whichever one I put in front before it becomes what? Number 1. DaVinci is very, very intuitive like that. It understands structuring, and how you place them, the positions. So I'll name this 1, right? Then for me to place a node before, right click, then I say add node. Where's add node? Add serial before. You see, this becomes number 1 now, but because, you see, if I didn't name this 1 now, you say, oh no, this is number 2, but no. You see, this was number 1, and it's now number 2 here, because this becomes number 1, isn't it? That's how it works. That's how it works. So this is using what? Your mouse. Let's go back and reset all nodes and grade. So I can do the node after, which is the serial after, by hitting Alt S. This is it, Alt S. And I can do a node before. Click that node that you want to get a node before it, right? You click on it and you say Shift S, and see it comes before. That is how to get this thing going. And that's all about positioning with nodes. Next thing now is that the types of nodes. Now we already know this is a serial node. So you keep hitting Alt S, you keep getting serial nodes in front of it, right? Reset all grades and nodes. So how do you get other kinds of nodes? You say add node, and you say we've done add serial before, then this is add parallel. This one now is based on the arrangement. If I hit add parallel, look at what happens. This node doesn't come after this. It's coming under it. And this is a very good place for me to explain how these things happen. Let me just back up a little bit. If I make an adjustment here, let's say I reduce the saturation to like 0. Then I add a node after, Alt S, right? And I do like a bluish tint. See, yeah, I get that bluish tint because this guy, this second node starts with this first one, right? Whatever this second one is doing, it's using this first one as a base. This guy here, this number 1, uses the source input as a base. So if you turn off all the adjustment. This is how it was shot, and this is how it was delivered to you as a colorist, and say, okay, work on this, isn't it? So when it was brought to you, the first thing you did, the first adjustment you made was using this as your input. So after I made that adjustment, which is desaturating everything, this second guy also uses this number 2 as a source, and I made it bluish, right? But then if I take this node out of the equation right now, if I take this node, you observe that it is now just the desaturation that happens because I have disconnected it, right? I just hit the letter E and it's disconnected. So if I drag it and put it in front now, look at what happens. If I turn this saturation off, I still have my blue stuff. I turn it on, you see it is desaturated. You understand? It is desaturated. So what's really going on here? Because if I take this back here, I still have my blue, even though I desaturated the first one. So what's really going on here? The structuring is very important. If you do something to the first one, the second one uses as a base. So if this bluish thing that I did becomes the first one, the second thing desaturates everything, no matter what you have done. If I add a million colors to it prior. If the next node I am desaturating everything, it affects everything that's coming to it. That's how it works with serial nodes. But when it comes to right click, add node, add parallel, this parallel is underneath, right? If I do the same things I did, now there is a mixing that happens. Let's say I add contrast here and I add saturation, a bit of saturation. So this saturation node now, it's not using this as a base. They all have the same source. They are all coming from this green guy. You understand? From this green source here, which is this image. So I am adding saturation independent of this guy, and I'm also adding contrast independent of this saturation node. So, but then DaVinci uses this parallel mixer to mix what I've done and give me an output. So, but if I come here, I click on this parallel mixer and say Alt S. This Alt S now is going to use whatever is coming from this parallel mixer as a source and do something to it. Let's say I'm adding more contrast. But this contrast I'm adding now is coming from the cumulative of this thing I've done here. You get, that's how it works. Reset all grids and nodes. Next one is what? And now the shortcut for the parallel node is what? Alt P. You can do a lot of it. Alt P. Okay? So mostly what I use it for Windows. Okay, I wanna darken this place, I wanna brighten this place, because if those things are kind of overlapping, I don't want to say, okay, I've done a window on this first node and I'm using that source for the second one. I want it to be mixed in such a way that it's seamless. Okay. Then the next one is your add node, add layer node, right? So this is layer node. But the thing about layer nodes now is different from the parallel mixer. Parallel mixer, they are transparent. Like I use what I have on top and I use what I have under and I mix them together. But this one is different. This guy that is under is actually, I don't know why DaVinci did it this way, but this guy that is under here is actually on top of this. And they are solid shapes. Like each of these are sources. Like they are just mirroring or just duplicating whatever is in this source is here. Let me explain this better. So this one that is under now, if I do anything to it, let's say I'm increasing saturation, you see, you can't notice what I've just done because there's something covering it. Just like in your edit page and you place an image, two images that are the same. So there's an image, you duplicate it, and you raise it on top of the other one, you put it on top of the other one, and you do an adjustment to the clip under you. Of course, you will not see it because it's the one on top that is visible. That's exactly what's happening here. That's why they call it layer node, because there are layers on top of each other. But when I turn off this one that is on top now, you see that saturation effect, happens and you see it. But I turn it on, you don't see it. So why do you use this? Let's say you want to qualify your skin and you want to make sure the skin is different. So you puncture a hole on this second one, on this one that is actually on top, right? You puncture. So whenever you see a layer node, so you are not confused. If you have number one is actually the first layer. Number two is what the one on top. Isn't it? Then you hit your Alt L because that is the shortcut. Number three is actually on top of all of them. You get. So if you turn this number two off and you have number three on, you still wouldn't notice the saturation effect that you did until you turn off number three. You get. So like I said before, you can uh, qualify your skin using this. Let's say you are done grading on number one. This is how you like it. You like the environment like this, but I don't like the way the skin is. So you can click on number two, go to your qualifier, qualify the skin, in a way that works for you. Oh, I'm doing this on the wrong node. So you come to node 2, then you qualify the skin, then in a way that it's the other one under has, you have the saturation there, but the skin doesn't have it because the skin is being represented by this one. So and it continues like that. So the shortcut is what, like I said, Alt L to get more of these layer nodes. So the next one is add node. Then you go to what? Outside node. You see, there's this lines here. Whenever you see these lines in DaVinci Resolve, actually means there's a mask somewhere. So if I do this now and I create a window, I put a window here, and I say let's make this bluish. Let's give it a bluish tint. All right. Then I create an outside node. Let's say I have not created this outside node. Then I right click and I say add node, add outside. Right? Add node and I add outside node. Then I do the opposite. I do like a yellow effect on this. You see? It's affecting what's outside this mask I've done on this first node. That's exactly what an outside node is. You get. So you just do this and you create, this is used for, let's say I have created a mask on one node and I have darkened that part, but I just want to brighten up the outside of that mask. Then you can do that with this one. So the shortcut is Alt O, as you would imagine. So that's it for these basic ones. So there are other kinds of nodes, the splitter and the combiner nodes. The splitter combiner nodes where you can add inputs. You can have 3 of these giving you inputs. That is like red. Let's add this. Let's say I'm adding a source, a corrector, add another corrector node here. So all these supply to this, all coming from this, then all going out to the source. So this is I've split this into red, green, and blue channels. Okay, so if I do this, I'm brightening the red channel. Okay, see, it's affecting the red channel here, right? If I do this, I'm affecting the green channel. Okay, then if I click on this one, I'm affecting the blue channel. So this is the splitter combiner nodes, but this is for advanced use, and we'll get to it if we have the need to, as we keep learning. So basically, that's nodes. Ask your questions in the comment section. If there's anything I didn't touch, let's talk about it. But this is for beginners, and this is just for you to get your feet wet with nodes. Nodes, like, these are the most basic things in color grading, right? These are the most basic things. You have to know what nodes are. The next topic we'll talk about node trees. Yeah, but a recap, you need to know that these are corrector nodes. These are serial, corrector nodes, right? That you use to do your adjustments. You can have as many as possible, endless. Okay, you can decide how they appear. Do you want them to be serial nodes, just serial nodes like we've seen, or you want them to be parallel nodes, depending on the use, what you're using it for, right? Then do you want them to be layer nodes also, right? So it's so important for you to understand that these things, they need to be learned. Yeah. So thank you for watching. See you in the comment section.